So these are the things that I'm going to cover this evening. So whenever we think about mitochondria, we think about energy. So this is, energy from, any cell in the whole body is going to require energy. So we often think about our muscles or our brain, but every single cell in our whole body has hundreds to thousands of these little organelles called mitochondria that make our energy molecule called ATP. So I will talk a little bit about energy and metabolism in the sense of like regulating our blood sugar and regulating body weight. And then I'm going to talk about all kinds of other things that mitochondria do and why it's important to support mitochondria. And then how do they get damaged? And then when we look at the mechanisms of what damages them, we'll be able to see, logically, what are things that we can do to help promote mitochondrial health. This is a stereotypical cell in our body. Our body has 30 to 50 trillion cells. And inside of our cells, if you've seen any of my talks before, you've probably seen this diagram. In this presentation, I am going to be focusing on mitochondria, which is plural, a mitochondrion is singular, and these are the organelles that make our energy, plus do a whole bunch of other cool things. So a few examples of different cell types and how many mitochondria would be in those cells. Our skeletal muscle has anywhere from 2,000 to 5,000, depending if it's fast twitch fibers or slow twitch fibers. Our slow twitch fibers would have more. Cardiac muscle has about 8,000. Liver cells, neurons, immune cells. I thought this was fun. The human egg has about 100,000 and sperm has about 50 to 100. It just has to get to the egg. And then the egg is actually contains the mitochondria that's passed on then to the offspring. So all of us, all of our mitochondria, all came from our mom. So when we focus on these organelles, inside these double membraned organelles, they have DNA. So these are actually kind of like little bacteria, and they can replicate themselves. They have genetic material. They express different genes. They have ribosomes, which would be the little kind of dots inside where proteins are produced. So they're their own unique little organism, and they help us make all kinds of energy. The energy in our body is adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. So it's made of this nitrogen kind of group, and it has a ribose sugar. Some people I know take like D-ribose as a supplement. This would be where the ribose is used. And then we have these three phosphate molecules. When we use ATP for energy, we basically chop off this last phosphate and then it will bind to something. When it binds to something, it makes it move. So if you think about your muscles, when you contract your muscles, like millions and millions of ATP molecules are binding to all the little muscle fibers, making them move. And so that's how we use ATP for energy. We need ATP for every single chemical reaction in all of our cells. So now I'm going to do just a little bit of science. I'm going to zoom in for a minute and then we'll zoom back out. But it's really important to kind of understand what is happening on this inner membrane here. So this inside membrane is this thing zoomed up here. So inside here is where we have these proteins called the electron transport chain. And we're going to talk about electrons and how we make energy, but just very sort of superficially. I'm not going to go into like the Krebs cycle and all that stuff you probably learned in high school. So there's an outer membrane, this inner membrane where the electron transport chain is, and then there's this intermembrane space, this little space in between here, and then inside this part is called the matrix. So hydrogen ions are also called protons. Okay, so when I talk about moving protons and moving electrons, you'll know what that means. So these protons are carried by these NADH molecules. And so essentially, when we break down sugar and when we break down fats to make energy, essentially the whole process is about moving hydrogens and electrons. And we're going to take the hydrogens and the electrons from sugar and fat, and we're going to move them all onto these NAD molecules. NAD is nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, which is a crazy word, but this actually, the foundation of this molecule is vitamin B3. I'm going to show you a list of vitamins. Basically, if you remember, the most important nutrient for being able to make energy is the B vitamins. Different B vitamins are required at different steps for different reasons, but in the end, in order to make energy, we need these B vitamins. So vitamin B3 becomes this NAD molecule. Then we break down our sugar and fat, and we stick these hydrogens on there. Now we're going to zoom to the very end of the process, and this is the electron transport chain. The hydrogens, the protons, are going to get pumped into this intermembrane space here, and it forms a gradient. We just build up this whole concentration of these protons in this space. And then what's going to happen when we have a whole bunch of protons in this intermembrane space, they'll eventually move through another molecule, which I'm actually not going to focus on this part, but there's another molecule here called ATP synthase. And basically when these hydrogens move back through, this is how we make energy. So the whole process, we're going to be splitting these hydrogens and electrons. The hydrogens are going to move through here. They're moving through these membrane proteins, this electron transport chain. And then the electrons are moving through these proteins. So as these electrons move through, so we move it from the NAD and we put it into, this is called complex 1. Some of them are on another membrane or another molecule called FAD, and this is actually from vitamin B2. And so the same thing, we're going to pump the hydrogens across and we're going to move the electrons through. So these big green blobs, these are the complexes. So we have complex 1, 2, we have coenzyme Q, or also known as ubiquinone or ubiquinol. You may have heard of that word if you've ever taken that as a supplement. This is an important part of the electron transport chain, and it carries the electrons. Then we have complex 3. More protons move into the space, more electrons move along. Then over here, we have cytochrome C, which is another part of the electron transport chain. Then it moves to complex 4, and then we produce our ATP. Now, as these electrons are moving through these molecules, they have to end up going somewhere. So actually, at the end, they're going to combine with oxygen. And this is why we have to breathe. Okay, the whole entire reason why we breathe oxygen is so we can put these electrons and the hydrogens that move back across, we combine it with oxygen and we make water. If those electrons had nowhere to go, which we're going to talk about, this is an important aspect. Sometimes the electrons don't just magically flow through the whole electron transport chain and bind with oxygen and form water and everything is perfect. Okay, so when we look at mitochondrial dysfunction, the whole entire thing that is wrong is with this electron transport chain. And so we're going to talk about what happens when these electrons can't go through this perfect normal pathway. What happens to them? And then what happens to our mitochondria? So when we're talking, now we're going to zoom back out. We'll come back to the electron transport chain. when we look at what are all of the actual nutrients that we need for that whole process to happen, to go from carbohydrates, which break down into glucose, which is a sugar, or to go from fats, fatty acids, and breaking those down. So we're either breaking down carbs or we're breaking down fat and we're making energy. What are all of the nutrients that are required? So I told you about niacin, vitamin B3, that makes our NAD molecule. We need vitamin B2, that makes the FAD. We need thiamine. So acetyl-CoA, this is the molecule that enters the Krebs cycle. We need vitamin B5. We need vitamin B6. That plays an important role in making that cytochrome C molecule. We need biotin to be able to break down fats. We need folate to be able to methylate things and to make new mitochondria. We need vitamin B12. This is an important enzyme cofactor for the whole Krebs cycle part I'm not talking about today. We need magnesium and manganese. And then we need some other minerals. We need copper, sulfur, alpha lipoic acid, which is a type of fat that is really important for regenerating glutathione and actually also stabilizing that membrane. We need carnitine to be able to bring fats to the mitochondria. We need omega-3, which is a type of fat that stabilizes the mitochondrial membranes, the outer and inner. So without omega-3, you actually can't have a stable membrane for those electron transport chain protein complexes, right? So omega-3 is an essential fatty acid. We have to consume it. Our body can't make this. We also need calcium. We need vitamin C and vitamin E. We need vitamin D. We actually need melatonin. That is very important for helping the mitochondria to deal with the free radicals I'll talk about. And then our thyroid hormones are all about telling the mitochondria to make those electron transport chain proteins that stimulates the whole process. Without thyroid hormones, we also can't make energy because they stimulate mitochondria. So we need lots of nutrients to make this whole energy system function properly. So if we think about just what's different about making energy from carbs versus making energy from fat. So I like the analogy of burning paper versus burning wood. So when we're using sugar or carbohydrates, it's like burning paper. You get a lot of energy pretty quickly, but it doesn't last very long. Whereas fat is like burning a log, and it's a slower flame, but it'll last for much longer. So when we're going to be using sugar for energy, this is better for high intensity kind of bursts of activity. Whereas when we burn fat, this is kind of more for slower, longer lasting kinds of activity. So when we're using our slow twitch muscle fibers, which is more endurance, then we're going to want to be burning fat. So you may have heard, the saying, if you want to start burning fat, you have to exercise for 20 minutes and then you start burning fat. That's not exactly true, but the idea is that you initially will burn through some blood sugar, and then once you kind of start using up some of your blood sugar and you're not doing really high intensity, you're doing low level, even if you're just like moving around or you have a physical job or you're, raking leaves or, just puttering around for like a long time, you're primarily going to get your energy from fat. Now, when we think about carbs and fat in our diet, we want to be metabolically flexible. We want to be able to get energy from carbs, and we also want to be able to get energy from fat, like our stored fat. So when we store extra energy, we store a little bit as a carbohydrate called glycogen, but most of our stored energy is going to be fat. So we want to be able to burn fat when carbohydrates are not available. And so our mitochondria, they will want to burn carbs first because it's easier. You don't have to put as much energy in to be able to get energy out. So when your blood sugar starts to go down, your body's kind of instinctive reaction is to make you hungry so that you eat more, so that you have more blood sugar, and then your mitochondria can just burn the glucose. Whenever you have periods of time when you're not eating, if you're intermittent fasting, or if it's just been a while since you've had anything to eat, or you're exercising, going for a long hike, then at some point, your body is going to need to go into the stored fat. And so it can take a little bit of training to make your body do this so that it's not always trying to just make you eat sugar to get easy energy. We want to be able to burn carbs sometimes, but we should also be able to burn fat. So insulin is the primary hormone that sort of regulates our blood sugar. Whenever we eat food, we're going to make insulin. We're going to make more insulin when we eat sugar or carbohydrates, then less for protein and less for fat. So when we consume fat, we don't make as much insulin. Insulin is the hormone that tells your body to store fat. So when we have extra calories, then we store it as fat. So if you want to decrease the amount of body fat that you have, you kind of have to either decrease how much you're storing, or you have to burn more. And there's tricks to this because it's not just about how many calories you're eating. These are the hormones that are involved in breaking down stored fat. Over here, lots and lots of hormones break down stored energy so that you can make ATP. How many hormones do we have that tell our body to store energy? Only one. So insulin is a really hugely, massively significant hormone when it comes to energy and metabolism and body weight. If you have a research mouse who can't make insulin, you could feed that mouse 10,000 calories a day and it would literally die of starvation, because if it can't make insulin, it can't store anything. So when we're consuming our calories every day, what we're consuming, the type of food we're consuming, and the timing of when we're eating matters more than how much you're eating. So I know lots of people that barely eat anything, but somehow have excess weight that they can't lose. And part of it is because of the type of calories, too many carbs, and not enough fat and protein, or it's about the timing of when they're consuming it. So if you think about every time you consume a carbohydrate, you're going to make insulin. Every time you make insulin, we are going to store excess energy. The more insulin you make, the more you're going to store. So when we have periods of time when we're not eating, we have tons and tons of hormones that can break down stored energy. So even if something catastrophic happened and you didn't make like a bunch of these, there's so much redundancy. There's so many other hormones that help you break down stored energy. When we look at, basically, let's focus on what insulin is doing versus glucagon. They're the kind of two main ones. They're the hormones that are made in the pancreas that determine what's going to happen with your blood sugar, right? So when we eat food, we're going to make insulin. Mostly when our blood sugar is high, this is going to promote storing energy, like we just talked about. It also promotes this process called glycolysis. And this is a process where we make energy without using a lot of oxygen. So that electron transport chain that I talked about, we need oxygen for that. That's an endurance, longer lasting kind of activity. Glycolysis is more about burning sugar really quick, like burning paper. You can get a little bit of energy really fast and then it goes away. When we have a lot of insulin, some other interesting things happen. It actually blocks fatty acid oxidation. So when you eat carbs, it is literally not possible for your body to burn stored fat. Your body is going to deal with the carbohydrates that you just ate. That's what it's going to use to make energy in the moment. And then if there's leftover, it's going to store it as fat. So you can't use blood sugar that came from eating carbs and burn stored fat at the same time. Also, when we have high insulin, we're going to increase reactive oxygen species. These are free radicals that I'm going to explain in a minute. It also inhibits mitochondrial biogenesis. This means when we make new mitochondria. So each cell has, say an average of 2,000 of these mitochondria organelles. They die and they break down and we need to make new ones. And if the numbers of mitochondria in your cells is decreasing, we need to be able to stimulate biogenesis. We need more mitochondria to be able to make more energy. If you have chronic high insulin because you're always eating carbs, eating many frequent meals, eating, lots of sugar, then this is going to cause inflammation. Insulin is inflammatory. If you have inflammatory things going on, you need to decrease insulin. Insulin is like throwing gas on your fire. And then insulin is going to create this oxidative stress that will damage your mitochondria. So a little bit sometimes is good. We should be able to eat some carbohydrates. Some people do carnivore and don't eat any carbohydrates, but we should be able to eat some. Now, over here, when we have low blood sugar, and we're going to make this hormone glucagon during periods of time when we're fasting, this is going to also promote, this will promote energy production, right? So this is going to stimulate the use of fatty acids to make ATP. And then we also have other cool things going on, which I've talked about in other presentations. It will induce autophagy, which is when we get rid of old organelles and damaged things, and our body kind of goes through this recycling and cleaning, detoxing process. So it's really good to have periods of time when we're fasting. Intermittent fasting is beneficial so we can stimulate this cleaning stuff. It stimulates the production of new mitochondria, and we make way more ATP when we burn fat compared to burning sugar. So the other thing, so it's not just completely totally about insulin, because sometimes people can't lose weight because of a few other things. So sometimes there are things that prevent fat from breaking down. And then you can feel low energy. You have stored body fat. Your body should be able to use it for energy, but for some reason it's not. So these are the reasons, these are the primary main reasons why your body would resist breaking down stored fat. Okay, estrogen. So too much estrogen, if people are estrogen dominant, that can make you store extra body fat. Inflammation. When we have chronic inflammation, when we have inflammatory conditions, and this would include people with vaccine injury that have tons and tons of inflammation, autoimmune diseases, those kinds of things, that can inhibit breaking down body fat. Toxins can also inhibit fat breakdown, and endocrine disruptors like pesticides, herbicides, and plastic. They're terrible for preventing our body from breaking down stored fat. And then stress. Stress hormones, especially cortisol, tells your body to store abdominal fat. So if you have a lot of belly fat that's just really stubborn and you can't get rid of it, stress hormones could be part of it. And stress hormones can be produced for lots of reasons, not just emotional stress, but if you're not getting enough sleep, if you have if you have chronic pain, if you have chronic infections, those kinds of things are also going to produce lots of cortisol that tells your body to store abdominal fat. Then we have some hormones that affect your appetite. And your appetite is kind of a sneaky thing, and it can creep up on you. And there's a difference between being hungry and having cravings. So there's all kinds of mood molecules that also play a role. I'm not getting into all of those, but here are a few of the main key ones. So leptin, this is a hormone that makes you feel full and satisfied. When you eat a meal, if it contains some nice fat, healthy, good, healthy fat, not trans fat, no canola oil, then when that fat starts to be stored in your fat cells are going to make leptin. That's going to tell your brain you're full and you feel good. So it's always good to have a little bit of healthy fat in your meal because you're going to make leptin. We can become leptin resistant. You don't want to do it all the time because if you make too much leptin, then your brain will start to ignore it, just like insulin resistance. Ghrelin is a hormone made in your stomach when your stomach is empty. I always remember this like your stomach is growling, so then it makes ghrelin, which makes you feel hungry. This usually only lasts about 10 minutes. So if you are fasting and you get the ghrelin feeling, usually if you distract yourself, have a glass of water, have a cup of tea and go do something, it'll go away pretty quickly. That one isn't going to just keep increasing. Then we have this one called cholecystokinin. This is the one, have you ever heard the expression, eat slowly or the hunger signal doesn't go away until 10 minutes after you're done eating kind of thing? That's this hormone. This is the sort of quicker hormone that will make you feel full. When you eat food with fat, again, beneficial to have some fat with your meals, then your body will release cholecystokinin. This tells your gallbladder to contract. It releases bile that helps you digest the fat, but it also signals your brain that you're getting full. And then we have GLP. So GLP is a hormone that will decrease your appetite. And you may have heard of a medication called Ozempic. Ozempic is a GLP agonist, meaning it increases the effects of this hormone, and people use it for weight loss because it decreases your appetite. But there's always problems with medications because it always has more effects than just the one that you want to have. And when we naturally make GLP, then we decrease our appetite. It slows our digestive process. And this is, to a certain extent, is important so that we can absorb all of the nutrients that we just consumed. If your digestive system is too quick, then you'll just poop it all out. So it does have to slow down once it gets into the intestines. But if you take a drug that slows it down, it can slow it down too much, and that can cause gastric paresis or like paralysis of the stomach, essentially. And then sometimes a side effect is vomiting because your stomach just isn't working properly. And then also long term, what ends up happening is this Ozempic drug will increase insulin. And that's not what we want. We don't want to increase insulin if we're trying to lose weight. Sometimes people want to gain weight, sometimes people want to lose weight. So what I did was I put down, these are kind of the main things that if you wanted to gain weight, this is what you would do. And so you can guess what you would do if you want to lose weight, because it's essentially going to be the complete exact opposite of what you do if you want to gain weight. Okay, so if you want to gain weight, you're going to eat many small meals all the time. Every time you eat something, you're going to make insulin. That's going to tell you to store fat. So if you eat all the time, you're going to make insulin all the time. If you eat a lot of carbs, you're going to make more insulin than you're going to store fat. Don't fast for more than 12 hours a day. because you need to be eating all the time if you want to gain weight. Another thing too, if you're very underweight and you're like trying to actually gain weight, then you want to include easy to absorb nutrients like smoothies and protein shakes, because when you absorb a lot of nutrients really quickly, you're going to make a lot of insulin. That's going to make you store fat. If you want to gain weight, then you want to build muscle. So you don't want to just gain body fat. You want to build muscle if you're trying to gain weight. Sometimes if you're having troubles gaining weight, you need digestive enzymes to help you break down the food to absorb it. And then manage stress, get enough sleep, avoid toxins. Those things are standard across the board, no matter what is wrong with you. So then you can see on the, if you want to lose weight, you don't want to eat all the time. You want to have fewer meals per day. Where did my mouse go? So fewer meals per day. You want to decrease the carbs and increase the protein. Oh, I lost my, there it is. So eat fewer times, higher protein, lower carbs, fasting 14 to 16 hours a day, avoid easy to absorb nutrients like smoothies and protein shakes. And then you want to do a balance of strength and cardio. You want to include mitochondrial support nutrients. And then these are the same things. Always manage sleep or manage stress, sleep, avoid toxins. Now, when we look at what do our mitochondria do? So first part that we talked about is making energy. With aerobic is with oxygen, anaerobic is without oxygen. But our mitochondria do all kinds of other things that are crucial to our health, to help our body detoxify, to function properly, to have the energy, to have all of our chemical reactions, to stimulate stem cells and regenerate tissues and all of those kinds of things. So mitochondria are also involved in calcium signaling. I'm going to fly through these and then I'm going to focus on this one. So today I'm focusing on the energy and the reactive oxygen species. So I'm going to come back to that. Mitochondria also control apoptosis, which is programmed cell death. This is when we want to get rid of damaged cells, cancer cells, virus-infected cells, old cells. So we need to have a certain amount of apoptosis to get rid of that. Mitochondria help us regulate our body temperature. So UCP is uncoupling protein, and this is when we basically, instead of making energy at the end of that electron transport chain, we make heat. Our mitochondria are also, where we have to, mitophagy is when we get rid of old mitochondria, and then biogenesis is making new mitochondria. We need to have lots and lots of good, healthy mitochondria in all of our cells. They also regulate methylation and acetylation. Basically, these are just ways of regulating gene expression. So mitochondria have their own DNA molecules and they express their own genes. The nuclear genes also affect them, but they have their own whole system going on. And that's important for detoxification pathways. So when we think about like our liver, that's very important for detoxing all kinds of things. It's the mitochondria in the liver, in all of those cells, that is doing the detoxification. And then mitochondria is involved in aging, and this is highly connected with unregulated oxidative stress, which I will talk about in more detail. Okay, we're back to our electron transport chain. We talked about how we're moving these electrons from the NAD molecule, from the FAD molecule, and then they have to go through our ubiquinol to complex 3, through the cytochrome, complex 4, and then they basically end up producing water. Now, what can happen when some of these complexes get damaged? Or what if you didn't have enough coenzyme Q? And what if this wasn't here? what happens to these electrons? Okay, so then what happens if these electrons can't keep going through these complexes properly? They will leave and they'll join oxygen here before they're supposed to. And when that happens, they make radical oxygen molecules like peroxide. Peroxide is H2O2. So this is what we call ROSs, reactive oxygen species, is when something is wrong with one of these complexes or one of these things in the electron transport chain, and the electrons can't flow properly, and then we make these radical molecules. Then all kinds of crazy crap can happen. And then we're going to have symptoms. Okay, now let's think about your mitochondria. So I made some polling questions, and I want you guys to answer A, B, or C for each of the questions. It's anonymous, so like I'm not going to know who's what. But for each one, you get 2 points if you pick often, 1 point if you pick sometimes, and 0 if you pick not very often. And so the higher the score, the more likely it is that you have some mitochondrial dysfunction. So how do our mitochondria get damaged? So I showed you that electron transport chain with the electrons going all over the place and making free radicals. So how does this happen? Why do those complexes get broken down? Why do we make all of these radicals? How come this is happening? So as we're going through the reasons why the mitochondria can break down, I want you to think about a list of things. It'll be very logical at the end. Plus, I'll give you extra bonus cool tips and tricks. But what do you need to do to make sure your mitochondria are healthy? Okay. So when we look at oxidative stress and free radicals, okay, free radicals are when we have unpaired electrons. I'm going to come back to that slide in 1 second. I want to show you what a free radical is. A free radical is when we have an unpaired electron. Electrons always like to be in pairs. When they're not, they'll steal electrons from anywhere else, and they can steal them from DNA, from cell membranes, from fats traveling in your bloodstream. They can steal them from all kinds of things. And this is why antioxidants are great, because they can donate these electrons and they can balance them. And one of the main antioxidant molecules that we have in our cells, in our mitochondria, is glutathione. And the mitochondria stimulate this and helps with the free radicals when it's a normal amount. So we don't want to have too much, but we actually do need to have some oxidative stress. A little bit of stress is actually beneficial. Think about exercise. When we exercise, we're actually tearing our muscles and we're causing all kinds of oxidative stress. But it's beneficial because it makes the body become stronger and more resilient. And it actually turns on our antioxidant pathways and helps us deal with all kinds of free radicals in the body. But when we have way too much, then we're going to just start damaging things. We're going to damage mitochondrial DNA and damage the mitochondrial membranes. So when we have chronic inflammation, when we have excess toxins, any toxins, toxins are always bad. There's no good amount of toxins. So toxins are all kinds of things. And, sadly, one of the main sources of toxins is our drinking water and our food. So food is sprayed with pesticides and herbicides and antifungals and antimicrobials in the grocery store. There's all kinds of, people's peed out medications in our municipal water. So we have to try to find ways to decrease our exposure to all kinds of toxins. Excess alcohol is quite terrible for our mitochondria. A little bit now and then, it maybe helps you with stress hormones and makes you feel relaxed and it has some benefit, but excessive amounts of alcohol is a toxin. Iron, too much iron is a toxin. Iron is very, like it can be easily oxidized and it can increase oxidative stress. When we don't have enough nutrients, all those nutrients, the B vitamins, the copper and the, all those minerals that we talked about, when we don't have enough of those, then we're going to have oxidative stress. Then we can't make those electron transport complexes, and then the electrons go all over the place and make free radicals. And then if we're deficient in antioxidants, there's some genetic factors. And actually, I've found through doing genetic analysis with a lot of people that have been vaccine injured, quite a lot of people I'm noticing have inflammatory kind of tending DNA and decreased ability to either methylate or make glutathione. So there's some genetic predispositions that contribute to people having stronger reactions to the vaccine. Chronic high insulin is very, very bad for our mitochondria. So if you have energy issues, you need to think about your insulin. Pesticides and herbicides damage complex 1. So complex 1 is important. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. Okay, that was our free radical diagram. Other things that can damage our mitochondria, medications. So statins are one of the most well-known medications that inhibit coenzyme Q10 or ubiquinol. When you take statins and you don't have that, that means the electrons can't move through that electron transport chain, and the electrons are going to bind with oxygen and make free radicals. So we can take coenzyme Q10 or ubiquinol as a supplement, but it's still not the same as it being in the mitochondria. So making sure that these supplements get to the right place and the right amount, the right cells is still very difficult. Metformin is a medication that can, over time with chronic use, inhibit complex 1. It also depletes mitochondrial nutrients, and it can inhibit the biogenesis, the production of new mitochondria. Acetaminophen is terrible for your glutathione. And then all kinds of things, including chemo and radiation, can damage mitochondrial DNA. And then you can't make the complexes of the electron transport chain. Plastics are bad because they damage lipids, all kinds of things. Any kind of oxidative stress can damage lipids. I'm going to tell you about some supplements that can help reduce that. But we want to try to minimize plastic. Don't drink out of plastic water bottles and don't microwave food in plastic. Just try to minimize plastic. Fluoride can actually damage complex 4. So again, damaging any of those complexes means that electrons can't flow through the whole chain naturally, and you're going to make reactive oxygen species. Heavy metals. Heavy metals are terrible for mitochondria because they can displace all the essential minerals that we need to make energy. We need copper, we need zinc, we need a certain amount of iron, we need manganese, and we need magnesium. Those are really important minerals for mitochondrial function. This is the last screen for what damages our mitochondria. Lots of things can damage our mitochondria, right? EMF, electromagnetic frequencies. I've done quite a few presentations on this topic. This affects calcium signaling. It actually creates a reactive oxygen species called peroxynitrate, which is one of the most terrible oxidizing molecules in our body. So we want to minimize that, and we want to add grounding, outside bare feet, get some free electrons from the earth to help balance free radicals. Hypoxia. Hypoxia is low oxygen, And this is an interesting one because the COVID infection and the spike protein can cause hypoxia for lots of different reasons. I know a lot of people that have vaccine injuries. You can test yourself at some point, take a big deep breath and hold your breath. And if you start to feel like you're going to faint in like 10 seconds, instead of being able to hold your breath for at least half an hour, half a minute. We should all be able to do it for at least half a minute. But if you can't do it for very long at all and you start to get tunnel vision, you feel like you're going to fall down, spike proteins do that. So it can decrease nitric oxide. This is a molecule that dilates our blood vessels so that we can have blood flow, and it also helps keep our blood pressure down. What spike proteins can do is cause vascular constriction, also a bunch of clotting, but it can constrict the blood vessels, which decreases blood flow. If we can't bring oxygen to our cells, then mitochondria can't make energy. We need oxygen to make energy. Nutrient deficiencies, chronic stress. Chronic stress, this is a bad one. Stress hormones create tons of oxidative stress, and it damages our mitochondrial proteins, the DNA. It affects the whole electron transport chain. Spike proteins I talked about, other infectious things can do the same. Lack of sleep and being sedentary. So sedentary lifestyle means we can't make new mitochondria. I do have a tricky supplement in case you have mega chronic fatigue and you can't move at all. There is a supplement that can help. But ultimately, you do want to move around to a certain degree every day to a point that is comfortable for you. You don't go running if you hate running, because you're just going to make cortisol and then you're going to have stress. You have to find movement activities that you don't hate. But the more that we can move around, the better. There's some cool things that we need to do to help our mitochondria. And then right before I do that, I did want to mention this cell danger response. This is something that can happen when we have a massive surge of free radicals, when we have, a traumatic experience, an infection, and the spike proteins have done this in some people that are vaccine injured, and it's caused havoc on people's mitochondria. And what happens when we have a cell danger response is the mitochondria switch into this protective mode, and you make low ATP. This is when you crash. This is when you hit a wall. This is when you go to bed for 40 hours. Okay. Then you've hit this kind of a situation. Usually the only thing you can do when you're at this point is just sleep. And then gradually your body will come out of it. But there's lots of things that we can do that are going to help our mitochondria. I've kind of ordered these in kind of order of priority, but I think over time I do flip things around a little bit, like, nope, this is more important than that. But ultimately, all of these things are important. I kind of think that I would prioritize this side. Not that this side isn't good, but we have to avoid toxic things. If you have a high score on that mitochondrial dysfunction test, then you have to figure out what toxic things you're exposed to. And that includes eating crappy food and drinking city water that's not filtered and eating food that's covered in pesticides and herbicides. Anything non-stick pans, forever chemicals, anything waterproof. What kind of things are you putting on your skin? Think about your laundry soap. There's a lot of things, there's a lot of places where toxins can be in our environment. And the more we can reduce that, the better our body can be at detoxifying, right? It's all about balance. Our body breaks down when we can't deal with what's coming in. Oops. Mitochondrial nutrients. So that whole slide of things, which I'll put up again, and I'll also, in our circle group, I'll post like a PDF of that, so you don't have to write it all down. So we can't be deficient in any of the nutrients that your mitochondria needs to be able to make those protein complexes. And then reduce insulin. Too much insulin is terrible. So we either need to decrease our carbs or eat fewer times per day or fast more or be more active. Like, so if you're really dying and craving sugar, then do it. You're better off to have sugar right after lunch. So it's all kind of lumped together in one meal rather than having a meal and then wait a couple hours and then have a snack that's like ice cream or something and then have dinner, right? If you only eat twice a day, you're going to make less insulin, even if sugar is involved in one of them. So there's little tricks like that to help you decrease your insulin without just like feeling like you can never have a treat, right? You can still have treats. Stress hormones are huge. Stress is involved in every single chronic disease. So we need to find ways to decrease our stress response and our stress hormones. And we can't be sleep deprived. So you got to make sure that you're getting enough sleep. And then over here on this side, these are like extra bonus things. Although clean water, I really think that everybody could use a good water filter. Heat and cold exposure, it's not essential, but if you have mitochondrial stuff, it can be beneficial. Polyphenols are great. I talked about those in the Spike Detox Part 2 presentation that I did. That's on our Rumble channel. Detox support stuff, which is also part of that video. And deep breathing, actually, just because then you get oxygen, right? We need to get lots of oxygen for our mitochondria to be able to work. Plus, deep breathing stimulates our vagus nerve and decreases our fight or flight response and kind of helps with the stress factor as well. Okay, so this is a repeat of the nutrient slide that I already showed you. Okay, so these are all the things that if any of these things are missing, your mitochondria will not be able to effectively and efficiently make energy. So most of these things in an ideal world, we should be able to get from our food, but our food is grown in depleted soils, and unless you're growing your own and getting, healthy organic kind of stuff, a multivitamin that kind of includes some of all of this stuff might not be a bad idea. Gauge your own diet. You get a lot of these. B vitamins are really high in meat and fish and eggs and that kind of stuff. So if you're eating meat, you're likely going to be getting enough of this stuff. We also get lots of minerals and carnitine in meat. Now, as a supplement, if you have a problem with fasting, let's suppose, you get to 12 hours and you're like, man, I can't fast anymore. I got to eat. Then a good supplement for you would be carnitine. If you have trouble fasting, you need carnitine. This helps get fatty acids into your mitochondria so that you can make energy from fat. Okay, so that's an important one. If you have a lot of inflammation, if you have a lot of inflammatory stuff going on, then there's a few things you're going to want. ALA is going to be really important for stabilizing the membranes in your mitochondria, and omega-3 for also stabilizing the membranes. And then vitamin E. Vitamin E is the most amazing lipid antioxidant that helps prevent those free radicals from destroying your membranes. So those are really, really important. Vitamin C is also a great antioxidant. It helps recycle glutathione. So there's a few tricks about that one. And then a couple of other supplements that can be beneficial if you're really stuck. If you have like mega fatigue and you can't fast and you're craving sugar and you're just tired all the time and you need extra help, then these three things, these are like, I would say like a mitochondria stack. So NAD or niacinamide, this is that molecule that we talked about that carries those hydrogens and electrons to the electron transport chain. We need to have these to bring the electrons to the electron transport chain. This is the whole beginning. Otherwise, you can't make energy. So if you don't have enough of this, then it's going to be difficult to make energy. So you can take this as a supplement. Ubiquinol you can take as a supplement because now I want to go back to I think I have another diagram of the electron transport. Let me just have a peek. Okay, yeah, okay. So ubiquinol is likely to be depleted or damaged. And so you can take that as a supplement to make sure that that isn't one of the missing links in your electron transport chain. And then complex 1 can also get damaged a lot, and I'm going to get to that with the methylene blue coming up. PQQ, this can help you stimulate biogenesis if you can't exercise. Let's suppose you're just so chronically fatigued, or for whatever reason, you can't fit in exercise because, well, if you can't fit it in, then I think that you should reprioritize. But if you are unable because of your low energy, then PQQ can be very beneficial because it helps you make more mitochondria. The more mitochondria you have, the more energy you can make. Be careful with this one. If you have anxiety, it actually works really well and it can overstimulate you. So if you do take this one, take it in the morning. Same with B vitamins. Take them in the morning or like with your first meal. Don't take B vitamins at bedtime because you're just going to stay awake all night. Okay, methylene blue. This is used by a lot of people with a lot of like mitochondrial issues. And I'm going to explain how it works. I'm not necessarily promoting this. I personally would rather eat healthy food and fast and exercise than take a dye. It's a dye. It's a synthetic molecule. It's not a natural substance, but it can carry electrons. So I'm just going to go back to our electron transport chain. Our electrons have to move from NAD to complex 1, FAD to complex 2, and then it goes to, our CoQ10, etc. When we have a lot of oxidative stress, the two most common things that are damaged the most is complex 1 and ubiquinol or CoQ10. So we can take this as a supplement. And if this is damaged from all these free radicals, right? If your electron transport chain is broken, methylene blue can take the electrons from NAD and it can move them all the way over to complex 4. So it can bypass a lot of these complexes in your electron transport chain. And so that once the electrons are in complex 4, then you make water and then you make energy. So if you're having lots of problems, methylene blue can take electrons from NAD and move them over to complex 4. Methylene blue is not going to cure your mitochondria. It's not going to make you make new mitochondria. It doesn't fix the electron transport chain. It just helps you while you're in perhaps, a major crisis. So that's how that works. And then the last thing is red light and near infrared light are actually amazing frequencies for stimulating your mitochondria. These are the red light frequencies. 620 to 680 nanometers, and 810 to 880 is our near infrared. It stimulates the movement of the electrons through our electron transport chain. It stimulates the copper in our complex 4. Also, copper deficiency will ruin your electron transport chain. It makes you produce more energy and less reactive oxygen species. And this is why red light therapy is kind of like an anti-aging thing as well, because you have less reactive oxygen species. So when we have a lot of free radicals, that damages our tissues and our cells and our DNA, and that's what makes us age. Red light also stimulates mitochondrial biogenesis. These contraptions are fairly pricey. Exercise still works, but they're pretty beneficial for lots of things. They trigger growth and repair, tissue regeneration, and they reduce NF-kappa B. So if you've heard any of my other talks, I talk about this a lot because it's the master signal for inflammation. And when we have mega inflammation, we want to decrease this molecule. And red light is very good at doing that. But I hope that made sense. And I hope you all now love the electron transport chain.